when me and my wife, Amanda, were dating, we got to, we were going on a date downtown Chicago, having a great time. And this was at the stage where we were like, you know, I had never held her hand before, but you know, when you kind of like walking, talking fast, you know what I'm saying, making my way downtown. And so you just kind of like, you know, kind of like dangling your fingers just a little bit, just to kind of see what's happening, you know. But Portillo's is my jam. I'm going to my favorite restaurant with the girl of my dreams. You know, I'm living high in the sky. I'm like, yo, this is where it's at. And I'm like, I can't imagine this day getting any better. And we're in line. And they said, hey, sir, what would you like? I said, I looked at Amanda and I said, hey, get whatever you want. I'm gonna order first. Let me get 3 chili cheese dogs, large Sprite, chocolate cake shake. You know, I turned up. Okay, that's how I'm gonna roll. I said, hey, get whatever you want because I'm a baller. You know, you at Portillo's, like, what you gonna do? So I'm like, hey, get whatever you want. And this is what she did. She said, can I get a grilled chicken? Grilled chicken at Portillo's? All right, that's cool. You want some fries? No, just the water. I'm like, but you don't want no fries because I mean, like, listen, I can afford to get you more than just a grilled chicken and a water. Like, what you need? She's like, no, that's it. You already know the rest of this story. We sit down. She grabs my large fry and dumps it onto the table. Like, we gonna share our fries. I said, the devil is a liar. No, we are not. Listen, so I got back in line. I said, I need another large fry and brought her own fries. She's like, listen, I don't know what it is, Mom. She just want a little taste of anything I get in the world. I'm like, no. I don't know if this is gonna work. I called my mentor. I said, listen, listen. I just went on a date with this girl. I told you she was awesome, right? Here's the deal. She tried to steal my fries, and I ain't having it. And he said to me, Ryan, you are going to have to learn to share your fries. You're going to have to learn the art of what it means to give up something that you want for something that they need. And you know what? It's so interesting is most of us, it's not sharing fries. Some of us are having some deep-seated arguments over money, over sex, over adultery, over some very, very heavy issues. But I wonder what would happen if we would start to bring honor back into our relationships. Because most people don't want to play this honor game because they think, I'm going to be doing all of the outdoing and they're not going to do anything. They think, I'm the one always sharing my fries. They think it's not fair because I serve them more than they serve me. But this is an honor competition where you actually don't keep score. It's not about keeping track of how many times they got their way and how many times you didn't get yours. No, you're not keeping score. Listen, if you're at a place in life where you're looking to get into a relationship or just trying to keep your relationship growing, you've got to loosen your grip on your way of doing things. Our way is overrated anyway.
Welcome, everyone. This is the LIfecast with Ryan League. I'm your host, Peter Reeves. You just heard Ryan do a talk called I Want My Baby Back, talking about effective communication in marriage. Ryan, what is up, man? That was a great talk. How you doing today?
Man, I'm doing great, man. I am just excited that in Texas, barbershops have opened. And there is something about, I feel like a new man getting out the chair. Okay, I was so excited to get a haircut that I forgot to pay the man, because I Venmo my barber, okay? Like, I walk out, I say, hey, I'll Venmo you later, but I was so hyped. Literally, I started FaceTiming people. I FaceTimed you for no reason. I was just like, what's up, man? I just wanted to be seen, okay? I was just like, I have not felt this great in my life. I was just turning my head the whole time. This is a 3-day-old fade that I have right now, and even that's sad. But when I first get out the chair, man, I'm telling you what, man, I felt like I could do anything in the world. So I'm feeling pretty good today, man. How are you doing today, Pete? How are you doing?
I'm doing so good, man. I'm ready for this quarantine thing to be done. I'm tired of being in the house, makeshift offices and things like that. But I've been getting haircuts on the regular, people. My barber, he makes house calls and he will be wherever you need him to be. So this is okay. I'm gonna get this cleaned up tomorrow.
No, you better keep it fresh.
Bro, so let's talk effective communication in marriage, just marriage in general. Right now, in the midst of COVID, we see all these different people, different situations. A lot of divorce rate is through the roof. Marriages are falling apart. People are being very vocal about it, posting on Facebook about their spouse, sitting next to their spouse. Why do you think a lot of people are calling it quits in this time right now? Why are people calling it quits?
Man, it's so interesting in the world we lived in pre-COVID. We all lived with this notion of our problems would be solved with our spouses if we just had more time together. We thought, if we spend more time together, we will have less issues. But for a lot of couples, more time actually gives more time for their issues to arise even more. And sometimes, especially if you're not on the same page, you can see just how far apart you really are. And then we've all been sort of forced into doing things that we don't normally do. And it requires a lot of selflessness that we are not prepackaged with at all. And so you see lots of couples that are fighting over the division of labor within the house, who's doing the cleaning, who's doing the cooking, who's doing the homeschooling, who's taking care of the kids, who's doing what and when, and whose job takes precedent over the other person's job. So you just see a myriad of things. And then for people that have either lost their job or been furloughed and been drastically impacted by COVID-19, man, there's just a lot of emotions that can kind of go into that. And unfortunately, some people believe that their only option is to just abort. It's just to get out of the relationship altogether. And man, my hope today is that people will be able to find hope in the midst of a down season in their relationship. Or maybe this podcast restores a marriage, or maybe they listen to something that tells them not to give up. And I'm an optimistic type of person, and I'm the type of person that believes that our best days are ahead of us. And I believe that can be true for any couple, anybody that's listening to this podcast, watching this podcast, that, they're going, man, I really want my relationships to grow in the future. So that's why we're here today, man, to talk about it.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. In preparation for this conversation and just for us talking about it, I was with a couple of my friends and we've been polling people, asking a ton of people questions about, what they think about marriage, what questions do they have. And one of my friends that I asked, he responded, a very staggering question. He said, Peter, what do you do when you don't love your spouse anymore? What do you do if you don't know if you love your spouse anymore? And when he asked me that, I was like, well, I don't know, but I'm definitely going to ask Ryan because I feel like a lot of people feel that they're just not real enough to say it, or it's a tough question,
Nah, man. And you know what? I think that's a real question because, what do you do when you don't love your spouse anymore? Well, I think we've got to sort of reverse engineer that question. And really, we have to redefine what love really is, because when we think of love in a noun form, we think of it as a thing that we fall in and out of. And so when we fall in love and we feel love, then it's like, okay, then I'm going to follow how I feel. My actions will follow how I've been feeling towards this person. And there's this notion and narrative that we were sold growing up with movies about falling in love and getting butterflies in our stomach every time we see this person. Who's calling you, Pete? Who's calling you right now? I know, it's going good. So there was this idea that we had growing up where we were watching movies, being sold this idea that you should have butterflies in your stomach every time you see this person. And I was listening to a message a couple weeks ago from a friend, and he just made such a great point. He said he looked up the lifespan of a butterfly, and He said the lifespan of a butterfly is actually 12 months. Okay, so butterflies die after a year. And isn't that just about the time that most couples kind of get out of their honeymoon phase, where they're not feeling it? It's not the same as it was when, and the butterflies just kind of go away. And so inevitably what ends up happening is people end up chasing butterflies. So they'll actually get out of that relationship. And some people will get married 5, 6, 7 times, and they've spent their life chasing butterflies. But that's when we just see love as a noun. But I think really what we have to do is we have to look at love as a verb. Love does. Love is this action. This is a choice that I'm making to sacrifice for you, to love you, and to be there for you. And I think sometimes when we say, hey, I don't think I love my spouse anymore, what I hear is you don't want to choose to sacrifice anymore. You don't want to choose to lay down what you want anymore. You don't want to, you want to stop making that decision because you don't feel romance anymore. But, I recently did this wedding, and the vows were for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, for better or for worse. For most of us, we all sign up for what? Better, richer, and in health, and often don't make a plan for worse, sickness, or poorer. And a lot of times that's what we end up with, man. And for people that don't really know my story, my father had a stroke when I was in 5th grade, which was I want to say that was probably year maybe 10 or 12 for my parents' marriage. And then my dad was actually disabled and pretty sick for the next 18 years. And then the last 2 years of my dad's life, he was on hospice and couldn't even speak. So my mother was married, honestly, more in sickness than she was in health. My dad wasn't a wealthy man by any stretch of the imagination. And so what I saw from my parents was not this romantic comedy of a marriage. What I saw was my mother watching my mother feed my father, bathe my father at times. Like, that's love. My mom, in the last 2 years of my father's life, she commuted probably 45 minutes to this nursing home where my dad was in hospice. After work and just worn out, she did not feel like doing that. But till death do us part, faithful to the end. And she made a decision to honor her covenant and her vows from 30 years prior. And so that was a relationship that I saw growing up. It wasn't flowers and roses, and it wasn't all of that stuff. It was two people that chose to stay committed to one another. And at one point, my mother, I believe it was their 30th anniversary. My dad couldn't even speak, but he had some awareness. He could nod his head yes. He could nod his head no. And my mom asked him 3 questions. First question was, Emmanuel, are you in any pain? She said, or he nodded no. Then she said, do you want to go see Jesus? He said, no, not yet. My dad's like, listen, my life is not over, and if I could reach one last nurse with my life, I'm going to do it. Third question was, do you want to kiss? And he nodded his head like his life depended on it. Like, yes, I want to kiss. And it was just like, man, they were making it work, even when it was the worst of circumstances. And so, man, what do you do when you don't love your spouse anymore? I think you have to ask yourself a question. Are you going to continue to honor that covenant that you made, honor that commitment, and choose to sacrifice for them? And again, those romance feelings, those things come and go, but you don't want to spend your life chasing butterflies. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think people, that's why it's so interesting with that phrase. Like, I fell into love. It's like, well, can you fall out?
Right.
Right. And I think people feel that way, and they use excuses to not stick to the covenant because they say it's not interesting anymore. It's not as fun as it used to be. So what are your thoughts on how do we keep especially in our marriage, bro, how do we keep the fire alive? How do we keep it interesting? It's like, what do you do? What are maybe some practical things or just some thoughts you have towards keeping your marriage interesting?
Yeah, I think that part of what you have to realize about your spouse is really what fuels them, what makes them feel more emotionally and physically connected to you. And really, it kind of goes back to the old love languages deal, really understanding what it is that makes them feel loved may not always be the thing that you feel like doing. But I think it's, again, I think the healthiest marriages are the ones that are really trying to serve. They're trying to outserve one another. They're going, hey, I'm here for you. And they're going, no, I'm here for you. And when two people are doing that, I think that's when you have a really healthy relationship. And so there's times where like how Amanda's really shown up for me over the past, I'd say 5 weeks, is every Sunday night, Amanda's like, we are about to watch The Last Dance documentary and we're going to get this MJ thing on and we about to rep Chicago. And it's like, I know that's not what Amanda would prefer to watch over everything, but like for her, she's going, I know this is something my husband really enjoys and I want to enjoy it with him. And so she shows up for me in that way. While I don't want to be self-serving or bragging on myself as to how I show up for her, but just know that I do my best to think of the things that would honor her, things that maybe that I don't feel like doing, or maybe it's me watching an HGTV show with her, but again, it's us showing up for one another in some way, shape or form. And I think that keeps the fuel going. And especially during this time, I think we have to be a little bit more creative in how we, do dates and whether it's ordering food or, we just went on a date today and we were like trying to find a park to eat our food. It was just like, well, so we were just driving around North Dallas trying to figure that out. But it is something that you figure out and it's something that you do together. So that's what I would say.
You've given me, bro, some of the best marriage advice I've gotten really from anyone. And you talked about how the best marriages are boring. And can you speak to that for a little bit? Talk to me about that. Where does that thought come from? What is that idea? Like, explain it for the people.
Yeah, no, the best marriages in the world are boring, and they you would just never want to watch them on TV. You just wouldn't, because what makes great stories is drama. What makes great stories is the police getting called. What makes great stories is infidelity. What makes great, this is why we watch shows. This is why we go, oh, they did that. Oh my God, you got to see this. You won't believe what happens at the end. But a healthy relationship is one where it's just like, yeah, we communicated about, where the kids are going to go to school in the fall, and we watched a show together. We held hands. We got some cheesecake. You're like, okay, like, is there any, where's the drama? And it's like, man, I think sometimes we have an addiction to drama. We want this, like, this fun relationship thing. It's just like, what, it really puts an expectation on humans that no one can really live up to. And I just love that, me and my wife, we just went out on a little date and we both were wearing flip-flops, and it was just like, it's actually kind of nice, because if we had gone to a nicer restaurant, it'd be like, oh man, it's great to get all dialed up and get dressed up. But it's just like, yeah, but we actually just get to just be ourselves, we throw on some Nike slides and hit the road, and got some brunch, man. So I think it's not it's not Instagram story worthy. And sometimes I think we want a social media friendly relationship. We want a relationship that's postable and when your relationship isn't postable, you feel like it's not a good one. And I actually think the ones that are incredibly boring are incredibly healthy. And I actually think that they can actually find true happiness because they're not comparing their relationship to somebody else's. So.
Dude, that's so good, man. Speaking of that, man, talking about relationships being like just kind of the best ones are kind of boring. Speak a little bit about conflict, bro. Like, how should people handle conflict? And this is, man, when I ask people, what are some of your questions about relationship? This one came up every single person that I asked, man. They were like, talk about conflict, right? How do we handle conflict? Hey, would you mind touching on conflict? Like, this is something people want to know.
Yeah.
Maybe we should do this podcast at the beginning of COVID, because we could have saved a lot of relationships, a ton of stress. So maybe what are some strategies or practices or whatever that you use, or some thoughts about how to handle conflict?
Yeah, man, people be scrapping, man. Like they be going at it, and it's a challenge. And I mean, we could probably do 7 episodes alone just on communication within marriage. And I'm by no means an expert or really great at that. You know, I think that's something that me and my wife have just continued to be on a journey with, of just saying, hey, let's continue getting better at communicating in our relationship. And I think a couple of things that Amanda and I have done well is get on a journey of self-awareness. And the journey of self-awareness is being aware of, okay, how do I communicate how I'm doing? How do I communicate my needs? How do I communicate my expectations? How do I communicate my desires? And realizing that Amanda's might be different. I think it's also important to know and be aware of how you fight. Some people are, they withdraw, they stonewall, they go silent. They're internally cussing you out in their head. They're not actually saying anything. Others blow up, and it just gets volatile, and then they're both just kind of throwing poison at one another. And so I think you just have to be aware of hey, what are some of my negative patterns of communicating, and then understanding what the positive options are. Man, I'm a big fan of Brené Brown, author, researcher, storyteller. And in her book, she writes about the generosity hypothesis. The generosity hypothesis is asking ourselves this question: what's the most generous assumption I can make about what they've said or done? What's the most generous assumption I can make about what they've said or done? And a lot of us believe that our spouse did or said something to us out of malice, when most of them do it out of mindlessness, not malice. In other words, they did not intend to hurt you. Most of the time, they just weren't thinking about you. They were just thinking about themselves more. And so sometimes we'll punish people for a crime that they didn't intend to do. They literally were not even thinking about it. And so I think that the generosity hypothesis is huge, because I don't know, Peter, if you've ever been, but have you ever been washing the dishes and you've been thinking to yourself, she's not washing the dishes while you're washing the dishes, and yet you're telling yourself a whole movie about the other person that's not washing the dishes while you're washing the dishes, thinking to yourself, well, I'm serving them right now. So it's like, no, you're actually washing the dishes you ate off of, bruh. And so that movie that we tell ourselves about them, that narrative that we have, is rarely ever true. It's rarely ever true. And there's so many things that Amanda does for me that I don't see.
Oh, I hear that.
That I just don't see. And so, man, we have to begin, instead of assuming the worst about the person we've made a covenant with to be with for life, man, instead of assuming the worst, man, what would it look like for us to make a generous assumption about what they've said or done? Or maybe there was something going on in their world, in their day, that was really hard, and we haven't even paused long enough to ask. And so I think those are some healthy things that you can do, is to really be slow to speak, quick to listen, and And most of us feel like we need to be heard. But I think listening is the best part of communication. Every effective communicator is truly an effective listener. So that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, man. I came here to host a podcast, not to figure out things to work out of my marriage. I feel so overwhelmed, bro. Like, in a good way, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, some of the patterns you're talking about, like, I see it in my own, for instance, if my wife, in the heat of doing something, will raise her voice, I'm like, oh, she's raising her voice because she doesn't think I'm a man. She doesn't realize who I am. I lift weights, you know what I mean? Like, whatever. And I tell myself a narrative that is, you said rarely, it's probably never true. The narrative I'm speaking to myself about her. The last question, again, this is from another great friend. He just asked me, he said, man, how much should you rely on your spouse? How much should you actually rely on your spouse and turn to them? Yeah, like, what would you say?
How much? Unpack that a little bit more. What do you think he was referring to when he said that?
Yeah, I think he was referring to, let me build the question. I think he was referring to, back in the day, we lived in communities that were kind of surrounded with our family. And so a lot of the things that his wife or my wife has to process with me emotionally, like, that didn't have to happen back in the day because the women would be all together for a period of time, taking care of the kids, and they would talk about that stuff then. So that when it got to me, she's excited and happy, and you know what I mean? Like, I tell my wife, I'm like, listen, talk to your friends all day long as much as you want, because sometimes I don't know how to process those things. So and then for guys, the same thing, right? Like, you're with the guys, we can get out our three grunts and we all understand each other, we're all on the same page. So how much should you rely on your spouse for maybe emotional strength? How much should you go to them and really unpack where you're at and how you're feeling? Like, what is there a pattern to that? I don't know. That's kind of what I think he meant.
I'm not sure if there's a pattern. I do think there is a balance. I think you should fully go to your spouse with what you are emotionally processing and mentally processing, spiritually processing. I think the error that we can make with our spouses is when our expectations for them are to solve the processing, to have all of the answers. So I think it's one thing to be there for somebody. I think there's another thing to try and be their God. We can't be each other's gods. We will be each other's companions. And sometimes in a marriage, the way we present problems and circumstances, we present them like, okay, fix this. When most of the time, what we're really desiring is not for them to fix anything, but to simply get in the boat with us. And to say, can this not just be my problem for right now? Can we just get in this boat together? And sometimes we just want, because I mean, there are lots of things that I go through mentally that there's nothing Amanda could do anyways. But sometimes it's just nice when she just sits with me. Sometimes she'll just sit in my office, our office, and just sort of just be with me in it. Does that make sense? It's not always. I think we have to take that pressure off of each other of going. And sometimes it's even communicating that, saying, "Hey, I don't need you to solve this. I don't need you to fix this. I just need you to know where I'm at. Here's where I'm at spiritually. Here's where I'm at mentally. Here's how I'm feeling about where I'm at right now, and actually be okay with just listening. You know, sometimes I think we just feel that pressure to have this eloquent response and, oh no, babe, you're amazing. No, those people are stupid. It's just like, you know, sometimes it's just, hey, I realize you got a hard job. Hey, I realize it's tough with the kids. Hey, I realize. And so sometimes I think we have to insert empathy, but I think we should not be relying on our spouse to be our gods and to solve all of our problems and give us peace and give us joy. I think they're there to be a companion, to be on the journey with us, but not to. They're not our savior. So I'd say. Yeah.
Man, married couples, we appreciate you. We love you. We're hoping this conversation was super helpful to you in any relationship. We're hoping this conversation would give you something to think about, some encouragement to your soul. This was the LIfecast with Ryan Leak. I'm your host, Peter Reeves. Man, if this was helpful to you, please like, comment, subscribe, and review, and we will catch you in the next one. Peace.